The day has arrived. It is time to get Klevu going on your website. You've signed the paperwork. You're super pumped about this. This is going to be a fantastic addition to your website. So let's talk about the process and what is involved to actually get this going into production. There's a few steps we have to take into consideration. The first step is your developer needs to download this module. And I say download it. It is via using a Composer package. Feel free to always make sure that your developers are using Composer packages. There's plenty of times that we've gotten into code bases and the code is literally copied into the code base, which means it's not very updatable. Composer package means you can just run one command on the command line and everything gets updated. So just keep that in mind. They're going to install it, configure it, make sure it's working okay on their local machine. They're going to push it up to integration and perhaps staging, depending on how this is configured for you. At this point, you probably will end up being involved. Why? Because they are going to need keys or access to be able to configure this so that they can vet it first on the staging or integration environments. How do we do this? Well, it's pretty simple, and I would love to explain this concept and how this works here. So I'm going to jump over into my computer, and we're in the Klevu Merchant Center right here. We click on this settings icon up here, and it drops us down to stores and IP exclusion. We click into here and we see we have a total of 20 stores available. I've only used one here in this case for this training environment, but the idea is one store per set of search results. So if you have a English and a Spanish store, that would be 2 stores. If you have a staging environment and a production environment, that of course also would be 2 stores. So again, if you have one staging and an English and a Spanish store, right? That would be three stores right there. So your 20 stores is the limit, the maximum. That's plenty for probably most merchants. There's probably going to be a few out there that would definitely go past this. But at the end of the day, 20 is probably more than adequate for most. What you will want to do is create a new store. I've already created one here. Now it's easy, just walk through the process, but out of this process, you get a API key and a REST authentication key. These are my keys here. Copy those into your Magento control panel. I will show you where to copy them. But the big point I want you to remember here is that every store, every URL by which your website, your website is accessed is probably the best way to put it. Each one of those has a store listed here in Klevu. So again, if you have a staging environment, that's one store. You want to keep it separate. A English production environment, a Spanish production environment. All of those count for one store. What happens if you were to combine them all into one store is you would have pollution or cross-contamination. So a customer is searching on the production website and they will get results pointing them over to staging. So now you have orders coming through on staging, or hopefully your staging environment is actually locked down so people can access it. So now they're getting errors and they're wondering what's going on with their search experience. Well, that means there's some pollution. To be honest, it's very easy for developers to do that. I have unfortunately done that myself before. It is unfortunate and it's very hard to avoid that outside of given specific processes which your development team should be following to greatly reduce the risk of said occurrence of cross-contamination. Now, that said, let's come over here into our Magento area. Now I can click into integration. This is found under stores, configuration, Klevu integration. Now, if I scroll down here, we see that we have these stores here, and one of them says it's integrated, but I don't see anywhere in this area to change or input a REST API key. Now, there is a very important step of the process that I intentionally missed to make it easy for you in this process. So what you have to do is come up here to scope and click on default store view, or whatever store you want to configure to access Klevu. Then you can see the authentication keys. You see API key here, view details, API key here, REST authentication key here, REST authentication key here. Just copy it over. Piece of cake. That's done. That's as easy as it gets. Now, when you have entered this in, say you're on staging, again, you have a staging environment configured in Klevu and you're setting this up here. You can come over here into search configuration, again, still at this store scope. So we have global, website, store, and store view scope right here at this scope down here. Then you can drop down, and of course you want to make sure that, product sync is enabled, all that stuff. But we can drop down here and we can click on this button, sync all data for the store. Now, this is not going to happen immediately. What this relies on is a background process called cron. It's a scheduler that runs every minute. Now, Klevu runs every 3 minutes in this to kick off these jobs to process product data, transform it, and push it up to production. Now, the nice thing is this is a customizable process, just like everything else in Adobe Commerce, and you can ask your developer to add or change or modify the data that's going up to Klevu. Out of the box, you don't need to, but there can be some cases we'll talk about later that this might be helpful. So click on sync all data for this store, and it's going to queue it up to be run over the next sets of 3 minutes. It might not happen immediately at 3 minutes. I suggest giving it an hour or two. If it doesn't happen with an hour or two, your background scheduler might be broken, which is unfortunate because at that point you probably do need a developer involved. But as you see, this is super simple to getting Klevu up and running on your staging environment. You're going to do the exact same steps that I just talked about once this goes to production. Now, if you give your developers access to Klevu, they can set it up for you. Or if you want to have this control yourself, you can do this. Now, why is this important that you know how to do this? Well, this can help you being able to sync all data yourself if there is cross-contamination where people on production are getting links back to staging. This allows you to resync this data yourself. You don't have to call up on a developer or anything. If you start seeing those links pop in, you can do this yourself. You can also come into the integration area just to make sure that somehow these API keys didn't get messed up. Now, the other thing is you can ask your developer to what's called lock these API keys. So the developer goes in and they run a command and they can lock it in the environment configuration. So that would be, I'm putting this is some jargon out here, but this will help your developer know exactly what I'm talking about. It locks it in app etc env.php. So this is a file, app etc etc, and then there's a /env.php. Locks it there. So then it is impossible for you to change this in the control panel, which there can be some value in that too. Once you get it set, you lock it, you never touch it again. So this is what does it take to get started. Fairly easy, but I want to empower you to be in full control of this.